Marginal tax rate based on the Tax Revenue Act of 1942 until the 60s was 94% on the top income bracket. But don't you get caught thinking that the rich paid taxes then either. Here's a logic question for you. If the top marginal tax rate was nearly 100%, the middle class tax bracket was also higher, corporate taxes were also higher, how is tax receipts to GDP lower than it is today? Really think about that. The middle tax largely does not avoid taxes. That is the rich. Corporate taxes were higher. Corporations can depreciate, they can amortize. Generally, that stayed the same throughout the past 80 years. How then were they at 16% tax receipts to GDP when we're nearly 18% now? If you notice something, we're talking about income. Capital gains taxes, the ability to borrow against your assets, whether it's real estate or stocks, is the way that the rich don't pay money. This has largely been unchanged. In the 1950s, tax write-offs were very generous towards the rich. You could write off a yacht, you could write off racehorses. If we just went back to 1950s revenue, our deficit would actually be bigger. If we went back to the 1950s spending levels in terms of GDP, we would basically cut our deficit to zero. Now, the 1950s, 1960s economy was objectively great. This is what the boomers inherited. The reason for this is first and foremost that we won World War II and were industrialized. We didn't have any significant competition after jettisoning the Soviet Union as an industrial power until Japan in about the 1970s. Another big part of it is that we had modern infrastructure for the time through the highway system that we built. We just committed to spending nearly $1 trillion starting in 2021 on infrastructure. That is $100 billion per year. Each year of that is more expensive in inflation-adjusted terms than it was to modernize our entire infrastructure in the 50s. What I'm asking you to consider is, should we model ourselves after the 1950s tax policy or the 1950s spending level? And I'm not talking about the nominal level of spend. I'm talking about the efficacy of spend. It is very popular to say, well, the top marginal tax rate was 90+%. It's like, okay, but if you look deeper, the effective tax rate then was in the 40s for even the top tax bracket. And we know the rich don't pay income taxes. That is doctors, that is lawyers, that is investment bankers, who, by the way, if they had a trust fund, wouldn't be working those hard jobs. You may think making $2.5 million is a lot of money. It is. I would love to make $2.5 million. But the real people who are skimping on taxes are those who make $2.5 million a month on real estate, or their stock portfolios go up 10, 20, 50, 500 $1 million per year. And then what do? They just borrow against it. Please, we have ridiculously bad wealth inequality in this country. It takes actually understanding and pilling yourself, whatever pill you want to call that, on what the actual problem is. I voted for Trump, but I believe that there is massive wealth inequality. I am asking liberals to address the actual issue. We may come up with different solutions, but if we are addressing the correct problem, there is more likely to be a positive solution. The income taxes, the marginal tax bracket, is a false flag. Going back to the 50s and saying that's the tax policy we should have would literally make our deficit worse because we would collect less money in revenue.